everyone. We're just going to give everybody just a minute to get into the room, and then we will get started.
Yeah, give it just a little bit longer. Melissa, it's still loading up with people.
Okay.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and get started with the introductions. It looks like most of them are coming in. Thank you everyone for being here tonight. We are very excited to get this part of this done. I know your journey has been long. My name is Jennifer Hartman, and I am here with my colleague, Melissa Mieyr. We are both those who help families navigate through that process of planning for college, but also paying for college and getting to this end game is very important. And we are very passionate about helping you guys navigate this very, very confusing part of the world when it comes to college financing. Because we're not just doing it for a short time, we have to do it for a long term for our kids going through college all the way. Before we dive in, if you guys want to share, because there's still a few more people coming in, if you want to share with us what colleges your kids are going to, that would be great in the chat. Great. Oh, it has some others. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. We are going to cover a lot of valuable information today. So please don't feel like you have to just write everything down. It's certainly something that can feel overwhelming. So we want you to be able to relax and listen to everything in the session. We are going to record this and you will receive a replay. So you'll be able to watch this later and really catch on to some things that you do need. And they're very important for this process. Also, we have the Q&A, and we just had to use a chat, but we also, just for housekeeping purposes and being able to answer some of those questions that we know many of you may have, we ask that if you do have a question that you do post that in the Q&A at the bottom of your screen. You'll find it down there in the Zoom. You can even submit your question anonymously if you prefer. I know some people don't like to share that question publicly, so feel free to do that as well. And we're going to answer those questions as best as we can as we go along. So Melissa and I will tag team through this process, sharing the information. So give us a little bit and we'll get to all those questions as we get to the end.
Jennifer, it looks like we have students going to lots of places all over the country. So that's exciting news.
I see it. Rutgers is one of them, Delaware.
Yeah, lots of places.
Washington.
Okay.
Awesome. Okay, great. Well, Melissa, I'm going to let you get started then, and we will start down our timeline.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So give me just a second here, get that up and running. Perfect. Okay, so as Jennifer said, I am Melissa Mieyr. I am going to be starting out our presentation this evening. So let's start by talking a little bit about the timeline. So I am sure that many of you are starting to get kind of bombarded by things from the college and what is coming next and what you should be doing. I'm sure many of you are attending orientation this summer. But then comes the bill. So most colleges will begin issuing a bill very soon if they have not already. And most of the time, those are going to be due sometime August, maybe early September, depending on when your students start school. So be watching out for that. If you don't have access to your students' portal for paying the bill, probably want to have some kind of conversation and agreement to make sure that you have access to that so that you can go in there and pay the bill and take care of those things. And I know this is a conversation that many parents have with their students. If they're paying the bill, they need to be able to have access. So those are, this is a great time to sit down and go through that. And then just remember, as you move on through the year, there are going to be other parts as we come through this, as when things are going to be due for semester and moving through that process. And we're going to be talking about some loans tonight and what the expectations are on how those move through the process. And they're usually a very short time period. It doesn't take that long to access the loans once you start the application process. That moves very quickly. And we typically do advise that you go ahead and get those loans in place by mid-July. So we're coming up on that so that you have everything ready whenever that August bill hits. So make sure that you are looking for those bills that are coming in to your students portal and preparing to pay that bill. Okay, so whenever we are talking about cash flow, as you are planning to pay the bill, think about what you can do to offset borrowing. Okay, cash flow is king. You have to remember every $100 a month that you can put towards college, that's approximately $5,000 that your family is not going to need to borrow. So really do think through, can you put another $100 a month towards that? Are there things that you can get rid of, those kinds of things, because it is going to be helpful on the other side. Because remember, we're not just paying the $5,000, there's interest that comes along with that. And so if we can manage that and keep from having to take out more money and borrow that, that is going to be beneficial to you in the long run. Okay, Jennifer, I'm gonna turn it over to you.
Thanks, Melissa. As Melissa said, cash flow is king. It is one of those things that drive the factor whether we can pay for college. Whatever method we use, that is something that has driven us to a point where we need to make some decisions. And this is the time that we always say we need to hit that reset button. One is our age as we get to parents and our kids' age, but then we're also looking forward to other things as our kids are going off to college. So we talk about hitting the reset button. This is a great opportunity to open up that financial junk drawer. And I know we all have a junk drawer somewhere, probably in our kitchen. It has all different things that sometimes we're not even aware we've stuck in there. But it's when we're talking about those things like the little expenses that have added up, such as streaming services. I have 5 people in my family and they all have a different streaming service. And so we have to kind of dwindle down and choose what we really want to have and compromise. Or we have a gym membership that we don't use, or other subscriptions that have just kind of gone out there. They're little dollars, but they do begin to add up over the year. So we want to start cleaning that financial junk drawer out. This also could be things like your kids' activities. My daughter was in volleyball. It was travel volleyball. It was very expensive, anywhere from $12,000 to $16,000 a year. This could be going towards college as well. So we want to make sure that we're looking at the activities that our kids are doing, or something, maybe they pay for a latte every day after school or before school. Whatever we're doing, we need to start looking at that and saying these are dollars that are going to add up, that we could be transferring those over to our college expenses. So sometimes it's our grocery bill as well. I have a daughter and I have twin boys. And so that can be a difference in our grocery bill. For my boys, it certainly does make a big difference. So consider those as our transferable dollars into our college. So when you start digging, you'll almost find something somewhere. I know we do, even if it's a small amount, whether it's $25 or $250. This could be, anywhere up to like that $3,000 a year. So we're talking $12,000 we've found in just that junk drawer. So make sure that you acknowledge this and that we start to put a plan together. Sometimes this is a really good time to revisit our own finances as parents and moving forward. So how we pay for college affects our retirement. So this is a great time to have this conversation. But we consistently want to make sure that our families are looking towards the future. So we're not talking about paying for 1 year. We need to talk about paying for 4 years. And this is really that time. But when we ask clients sometimes, what do you have to pay? And they say zero, we really have to push back and start digging. I know sometimes it feels like we have zero because cost of living is so much, but we really want you to take a fine-tooth comb to your finances and start this process. This is really the beginning process of this.
And for just one other thing I want to mention, this month, for instance, my electricity is contract is up, and those are other things that you can change as well. So if you've got utilities that allow you to change throughout time, shopping new prices and better deals on those can always save you lots of money as well. So that's a great thing to think about as well.
A very big piece of that. So this really leads us perfectly into that next tool or strategy that we talk about, reducing what we borrow. This is that monthly payment plan that a lot of schools offer. I highly encourage you to look at this just so you know your options, whether you're going to use it or not. Know what the institution that your child is going to attend, what they're going to offer in case you find yourself in this need for this payment plan. When you enroll, most of them are just you're agreeing to pay on a schedule. So this could be in 10-month schedule or in the semester. So it's 3, 4, or 5 payments. It's just really dependent on the school and how they've established those payment plans. Some start as early as the spring or summer. I see most start in summer, but what this will do, this will help you break up those payments in smaller amounts. I highly encourage you again to look at this because typically we're looking at a small enrollment fee somewhere between, I would say, 40 and 70 is what I'm seeing. In fact, I actually had a parent today tell me they were paying just $20 to enroll in it, and it was interest free. So it gives him the ability to balance these things out and not have to pay interest on dollars and actually earn money on the money that is sitting in his account. So I always tell parents to utilize this and leverage this if possible for their plan. These payment plans are just a key piece in this when we talk about the full puzzle. So make sure you do think about this if you do have some savings and need to balance some things out or you're doing a cash flow. I'm sorry, Melissa, one thing I did forget to mention is that if you don't see these, that is one of the questions I have on here, is if you don't see this on your bill, you either need to look at the portal sometimes of your student, so have your student open up their portal, or sometimes it's in the award letter or on the final bill that's coming in. If you don't see this, reach out to your financial aid department for the school. They will be happy to help you and tell you how to access this type of program.
All right.
Okay, the next one, Melissa.
Here it goes.
Okay, great. So in paying for that, we have a payment plan, but we have our savings and we're not exactly sure how we want to kind of divvy it up because again, we talked about we need to be strategic about it. So this is not just about the 1 year, it is about the 4 years. Laying out a plan for all 4 years, it's something that helps you determine what resources to use and when. You don't want to go into your student's junior year or sometimes just their sophomore year and we find that we actually needed more dollars and we've run out of money or our situations change and we needed some of the loans that were offered in the freshman year and we opted out of them because some of those initial loans that we get are going to be take it and leave it. So we want to really make sure that that 4-year plan is essential, knowing whether we did or we didn't need some of those things that are on the table during a time and then off the table later. Another resource is going to be the financial gifts from grandparents, whether it's grandparents or relatives. I know sometimes this can be a difficult conversation. I hear this a lot that, they've committed to giving me something. I just don't know what. It's very uncomfortable. But in order to have a really good plan, I highly recommend just sitting down with them, sharing with them that you're trying to make sure that you can commit and make sure that you can get your student all the way through school. It would be great if they're still offering that to be able to give you some kind of idea of what the money may be so that you can finalize your 4-year plan and know what you need to either borrow if you don't have enough or save a little bit more. So those are some of those things that I would recommend doing that. The other is that 529 plan. This is one that it comes along with the savings plan. It's just like a savings plan, but because it is a tax free account, it is something important that we focus on remembering that when we do take money from our 529 accounts, that we do look at what the qualified expenses are. So make sure that if you don't understand what your qualified expenses are for, that you reach out to your administrator, or sometimes it's online or it's shown somewhere when you log in. But it is typically the qualified expenses for the 529 accounts that we're going to be spending are going to be things such as tuition, fees, room and board, and some of your books. The critical piece of this is that your 529 distributions must happen in the same tax year as your expenses when you're paying it. So it's crucial that if we are trying to balance out everything, we'll talk about the reason why this is even more important later, some credits that we can look into. We need to make sure that we're balancing this out so we're using it to the best of its ability. But make sure you're also keeping good records for this. This is up to you to manage this. If you take out, it's your responsibility and it's a penalty to you. So we highly recommend that you have a good accounting system to keep track of this. And the last one is the UGMA and UTMA. And if you've never heard of this, you probably don't have one. This is one of those that it's a little bit more rare to see these, but these are a student account. And what we do tell families is to be very careful with these. Remember that this is an asset of your child, and there are tax ramifications when you do pull funds from these type of accounts. So it will also cause a financial aid ramification potentially if you are a family receiving need-based aid. So this is one of those things, if you don't know how to manage some of this is a great opportunity that we can help you with. But in all of these options out there, this is why, we have, several options, and we have that long-term plan that we need to do. Moving through some of these, we want to make sure that we're using them to the best of their ability. And as we go through some of the options, you'll see that it's important to balance all these out. So these are thrown up first because this is typically what people have is those savings and 529s and grandparent gifts. But we want to look at everything below that we're going to go through and make sure that we can put this together in that 4-year, and if we're borrowing 14 years, possibly, of a plan. Melissa?
Okay, so Jennifer touched a little bit on the 529, so I'm going to go into a few details. So as she was mentioning, you really want to make sure that you are making sure that you are using 529 money for qualified expenses. Okay, so this is all of those specific to the education, and that is tuition, fees, room and board can all be included in that, but not travel. So you want to make sure that you are using them for the proper thing and reaching out to your administrator to make sure that you know what you can spend it on. Also, really important to understand is that there is documentation that comes with this process of using a 529. So there is the 1099-Q that you are going to receive from your administrator for your taxes, and the 1098-T that's going to come from the colleges that has all your tuition information on it. So you want to make sure that you are keeping good record of those things. And one of the things that you want to remember is as you are utilizing these funds, there may be other tax advantages that you want to utilize. And one of those is the American Opportunity Tax Credit. And Jennifer is going to talk about that a little bit more on the tax slide, because you can't be double dipping into two tax advantages opportunities. So she'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. But also, when you are withdrawing your money to use for school, you want to make sure that you are taking this money out in the same calendar year that you are going to use it in. So for instance, when it most likely is a hiccup is when parents are taking out the money in November or December and hanging on to it till January to pay the spring semester bill. The thing that has to happen is you have to take it out and use it in the same tax year. So you want to make sure that you are paying very close attention to when you're taking out your money and how you are using it appropriately, because you want to make sure that you're not having any tax hiccups with all of that, because otherwise you can end up with some issues there. So making sure that you are doing that is really, really, really important of that. So also you may want to decide, how are you going to actually pay the institution? Do you want the money to come to you and then you pay the institution, or do you want it to go directly to the institution itself? So you have to figure out what works best for you. And so that's something that's important to work out with your advisor and administrator through the process.
And Melissa, I think there's something to notate on that, is that there's also another benefit is a 529. This is so hard because there's so many things that you just need to shout out that go together. But when we're talking about a 529, we're going to talk about loans later, but sometimes you can utilize some of your 529 funds, and it is limited to that loan amount that you can use to pay towards a loan. And it's $10,000 on a cap. So sometimes we're using it to strategize and help grow the account so we can have enough. So sometimes there's other reasons why you want to strategize with your 529 as you're going through college too. So
Yep. So I mentioned that you can use your 529 to pay for housing and your meals, but what if the student is living off campus? Yes, you can still do that, but you have to remember to look and see what the school is quantifying as that estimate for housing and food. So that room and board number. So what I really highly suggest is each year you go and find that on their website, you take a screenshot of that and you save that and put that in your tax folder that you save your tax documents with, because that is something that you need to have because you can only spend up to that much. So say for instance, the housing for your student that's living off campus is $10,000. But when you look at the school's housing, it's $8,000. Well, you can't spend $10,000 of 529 money to take care of that. You can only spend $8,000 of 529 money to take care of that housing. The rest of it is going to come out of your pocket. So you have to make sure that you, again, are keeping records. And so you want to look at the school website and see what they publish as the cost of attendance and utilize that number out of that for utilizing off-campus reimbursement for those kinds of things. Okay.
okay. So for the American Opportunity Tax Credit, this goes hand in hand with what Melissa was talking about, the 529 and leveraging that because it is a tax advantage account. This is not just a deduction. It is a credit that directly will reduce your tax bill. So to put this in perspective of how this AOTC credit works is if you owe $15,000 in federal taxes, claiming the full AOTC credit, which means $2,500 for that year, you then essentially would then just owe $12,500 in federal taxes. So this is a direct and I would say significant savings if you're eligible for it, because this is over a 4-year period of time that you can claim this tax credit. To get the full tax credit, the rule is pretty simple. It basically states that you must pay at least $4,000 of qualified tuition and fees using funds from outside our 529, again, because you can't get a tax credit one place and a tax credit in another. So this is the key in avoiding that, what they call the double dipping for taxes. So the IRS doesn't want you to do that. So again, this is a key strategy in bringing back some of those dollars to yourself and claiming this tax credit. And this is, when we want to do savings and we talk about if we have a lot of 529 monies, we want to make sure that we balance it out so we are still spending the $4,000 to recoup this if we are qualified to take this tax credit. The tax credit does have some income limitations as we've listed up here. For a married couple filing jointly, it is at that modified adjusted gross income. It's going to start to phase out at 160 and cap off when we hit that $180,000. For single filers, that's going to be 80,000 and cap out at that 90,000. The student does have to be a dependent in order to claim the credit. So if your income is above this limit, your student may be able to claim that credit themselves. So it's a strategy worth looking into if you can't claim it and they can, but it will be a more limited amount, as typically our students don't work enough to have enough taxes on their tax return, but they can recoup some of the dollars being a student. When you think about this as a long-term strategy within to recoup some of your dollars that when you're paying for college, remember this is a 4-year opportunity. So if you're getting the $2,500 each year, you're basically gaining $10,000 of your dollars back when you paid into education. So we want you to recoup as much as you possibly can. So we use the 529 to have some tax advantage. Then we can use the AOTC for qualified also to make a difference in our dollar. And I have twins. So for me, that means $5,000 a year. So that's $20,000 a year if I'm able to use that and qualify for that. So it's really important that I would say it's not a direct payment towards you, but it's something that we do need to be aware of that we can recoup those dollars. And the one thing that and I almost forget to tell you this every time, but it is important that you know that how we get this is definitely this form called 1098T does not typically get mailed to you. It is something that it will be in the student's portal most of the time. They used to be mailed out, they don't, but you'll need that 1098T. That's going to tell your tax advisor, whoever's preparing your taxes for you, what to put in there, and that will give you your taxing information and your credit back for yourself. Okay, Melissa, the next one. Okay, so when we talk about our general borrowing rules, its philosophy is borrow as little as possible. I know that's not always possible. Sometimes things happen and we don't get prepared enough for college as we needed to or we should have. And so we want to do this the smartest way when we're put in a position where we have to borrow. It is definitely not a one size fits all. There's a lot of criteria that go behind when we start to borrow, and it can't be a one size fits all because sometimes we have to look at the different things that fit us as a family. Like I said, if we've run into situations where we're having to borrow because we have other life situations, that sometimes can dictate how we borrow and where we borrow. So don't feel like whatever your neighbor did or somebody else did, that's going to be what's going to fit you. But the key is whatever you do is make sure that you do this in a very finite plan so that we know that we're going to survive through not only the 4 years, but if we're borrowing again, we're paying probably out at least on a 10-year loan for each one of these. We're having to manage this for 14 years. So be very responsible on borrowing what you're going to borrow. Melissa?
Okay, so talking about managing what we are borrowing, this is kind of our philosophy in what we feel is too much debt. So if you are a user of our software, you probably have seen these before, and we're going to jump in there here in just a minute. I want to talk about them. So first off, ideal is no loans at all. But the next is utilizing the federal student loans, and that is $27,000, $5,000 the first year, $6,000 the second year, and $7,500 years 3 and 4. So grand total of $27,000 that student is eligible to borrow by completing the FAFSA, and that we feel is very good use of loan dollars for many reasons. And then the next thing is the expectation of not borrowing more than that young adult is going to make when they graduate from college and get their first job. So, but beyond that, we feel that we are in a caution mode. We need to be very careful about taking on debt beyond that. And with new legislation, you will see this philosophy is really embedded in that, in reducing the amount of debt that people take on for college. So let's take a second. I'm going to step out of the software, or excuse me, out of the PowerPoint and come into our software. So over here in our software, if you haven't seen this before, this is our dashboard of our new updated version. And if you are in here, over here on the right hand side, you will see your schools. You can click on the little arrow right here and that will pop this out, and you will start to see the good, caution, ideal, great, those things there. Okay, but then if you click on the school individually and go over here to affordability, you will see our affordability information that I was just showing you on the slide. You can see what this means. So you can see that it breaks that down. Okay, so if you are utilizing it inside the software, you will see that down here underneath the major that you put in, we are giving you an estimate of what that young adult will be making coming out of that particular college their first year. So again, that gives you an idea of what to look for whenever you are trying to manage this whole debt process. Okay, so let's jump back over here to our PowerPoint. So you can see right here, we took some numbers from our data that we have, so you can see different majors are going to have different salaries. So obviously, having been one coming from the education background, it would have been crazy for me to spend a fortune on my education because I wouldn't have reaped that in my first, few years of being a teacher. So those are just things that you have to understand is what is the ability to be able to repay that. Even if mom and dad is taking on this debt, it's not, there's no ROI there. If you're taking out so much debt or taking on so much debt, that young adult's income is not going to make that up. So this is a real important piece to think about as you are making your plan and moving forward in this process. We don't want to over borrow. Okay, so we're going to get into the different types of loan options that you have. So we've got the federal loans, your student loan, and then your Parent Plus loan. We've got private loans, and we've got state loans, and then there's colleges, and then there are some alternatives. And with new legislation, some of these things have changed. On the federal side, and we'll be mentioning those as we go into details about each one of these individually.
Okay, thanks, Melissa. As Melissa talked about the different loans, the first one that we're going to talk about is the federal direct student loan. This is the one that if you have completed the FAFSA, the student has completed the FAFSA and submitted this to the school, this is going to be offered to the student as an option to pay for some of the school. So if they have some left over, so if they don't have enough scholarships and gift aid to cover everything, this is an option for them to do this. And this is where we do tell families to start. This is, again, the federal student loan, and it is what it says it is. It is the student loan. So it is the only one that will have no cosigner. It is in the student's name. It is the student's responsibility ultimately. What we do tell parents is this is a great place to start, but if you don't want your student to have it, you can pay it yourself. The student doesn't have to pay it if you're wanting to pay it. But again, this is going to go on the student's, credit. This is theirs. But they don't have to do anything extra to actually access this loan. So there's no pre-approval process. It's an automatic loan that they are eligible for. These are a take it or leave it type loans. As I was talking earlier, this alluding to some of those dollars that you may want to access. You cannot go back once a year has gone through and progressed. You cannot go back to access these dollars that are offered to you. So when they are being offered to you, we highly recommend that you do access these dollars offered if you are needing any dollars at all. This is incredibly important. Even if you say, I don't need them, there are reasons why we do want to utilize this, and we'll get into that here in just a second. But this is essential to show that we are looking for additional aid or looking for different things from the school as far as reducing the cost of college. But to look at what is offered for the federal direct student loan, it is for the 4 years. They do lay this out in the total amount. You'll see on the right-hand side of this. The first year is going to be $5,500. The second year is $6,500, and the third and the fourth year each are $7,500. They are going to be a total of $27,000. Each year, this is going to be set at a fixed rate. This coming year for 25-26 is that 6.39. There is a little bit over a 1% origination fee to these loans, which isn't much. But these are important. What you do need to know about these loans, these aren't applied to the first semester. They are divided in half if you take the full amount. And so they are divided equally from first semester or fall to spring. So that's something that people think they're getting that money all up front, but it is divided. But we highly recommend you use these loans. These loans are going to be automatically deferred for students while they're in college. So once they graduate, 6 months after they graduate, or we do have those who unfortunately quit, they will then convert to a standard repayment, 10-year repayment plan. There are other options for repayment, but that is the standard. And there's a great big further discussion beyond that. But it's important that we understand that this payment, is definitely on the students' back unless parents decide to pay for this for them. So a couple of reasons why we want to take this federal loan. It definitely is something that I do recommend for a multitude of reasons, even if we're not asking our student to take that on. And it can be very tempting to say, no, thank you. We don't want any debt. We don't want anything to do with that or put anything in our student's name. But strategically, it's often the smartest move that we can do is to accept this. And the first reason is this is offered year by year. By accepting it, you lock in that amount and it's a fixed rate. You don't have to worry about it going up and down. If you need the money, great. If not, you can pay it back automatically with no penalty and nothing that's going to hurt you, but it's going to actually put something forward that we think is really important. And that is showing that you have a genuine need for those dollars. So when something happens, say, unfortunately, we've had many families lose jobs. And in this market right now, we're seeing a lot of job loss, even being 20, 25 years in a company. Um, when we have to go back for appeals, if the student never accepted these, they don't look favorably on those students who didn't take some of the offers that they had for dollars. So I do recommend taking this, even if you pay it off. If you do need it, this is also a great tool as well. But the other thing that it does give for these students that are utilizing this is that it gives them better credit. So they get out of school, they have a better established credit because they've already been building up their loan, their loans on their credit. Yes, we have to pay it off, but it is helping improve that ability for them to stand on their own 2 feet and go out and get their own things they need as they graduate from school. So the one thing that is at the bottom of this slide, it's important that is many families go, I have this, why is it not showing up? And many times it's because a student didn't go into their portal and accept it from the school saying, yes, I'm going to accept this. And two is the requirements that are listed here. And that is going to the studentaid.gov and doing the loan entrance counseling and the master promissory note. And when you're going to go down that page, I know it's a little bitty piece on the screen, little image on the screen, but when you go into studentaid.gov, you'll notate this at the top. There's a menu that drops down. It says, I think, loans and grants on it. And it'll say loan entrance counseling on the left-hand side. And then right there next to it will be master promissory note. So if you do not do these or your student does not go in and do this under their studentaid.gov or FAFSA account, this will not notify the school and get those dollars in there. So make sure you do have your student do this if you are accepting this.
Jennifer, we have a question on this topic. Are students allowed to pay their federal student loans along the way as they're able, instead of fully deferring?
Absolutely. And I highly encourage it. As my daughter, we did this. I think I have some students who make a choice to spend some of their summertime working and paying it down if they're responsible for it. The one thing I did forget to share that we don't really talk about a lot, but it's important to note that while it is in deferment, it is on a simple interest basis. So that's actually great for us. It slows down that compounding effect of that. But then once it does go into the repayment phase, it does convert to that compounding interest. So it's a traditional loan at that point. So I do encourage students, if they are paying it, or even families, if they can spend a little bit, or if we have a bonus and we can pay it down, that's a great time to notate that we want to pay down as much as possible before we get to what they call that repayment phase, and it converts to a compound interest because your payments determine. It's about, I want to say, just dependent. I know that things have changed a little bit. About 1 or 2 months prior to going into repayment, you really need to have that payment down. So I tell students, if you get a lot of graduation cash, great way to pay it off if it's going to be your responsibility. So, okay. So in the federal Parent Plus loan, I know we have a question in this, and this is where I'm going to tap on this as well. The Parent Plus loan, there is some changes happening with some of the legislative changes, but just to talk about this as a whole, this has probably not been my favorite place to go for loans, just because I believe there's better places to go. But for some families, this is maybe the only place they have an option for. So if you're going to use this, it's an important factor that it does have a lot more, flexibility. So I highly encourage you to look at the pieces before you make a decision. Some things, we talk about not everything, it's not a one size fit all for everyone. So this may be the fit that fits you, but know that as a parent, your name is the only name that's going to be on this loan. If you're asking student to be a part of this loan, their name is going to be nowhere on this loan. So just know that, that is a deal between you and them, and the government does not care that your student is not paying you anything or paying part of this loan. So know that going in. So that may be something that you don't want. You may want that student to be on the note with you to make sure there's an accountability factor. So this will not be the loan for you. This used to be one of the most flexible loans out there and easiest to get to as far as access to dollars. But with the changes that are coming down the pipeline, that will change. It will also be limited, so it may not fit you anymore. We definitely tell you to look at this very carefully before you make that decision and know that those changes have just started to take effect and going to start be implemented. So it may not be your full plan. If you wanted to use these all the way through, this may not be the ones that you want to use. Some of the changes that, I would just recommend that have happened, I feel fluid just because the conversations and digging through the bills haven't been, haven't had enough time to go through everything that was actually adopted. But for the most part, I think what you need to know about these is if you're going to use them like a traditional loan and not think about some of the options that used to be there for repayment, and think of it as a direct loan. One is make sure that you can manage the payment, but know that this is a fixed interest rate once it is adopted each year. So just like the student loan, once it is adopted in June, the rate will be fixed. So once you take it, but there is a high origination fee. So that 4.2% origination fee, that's pretty steep, and that's driving this interest, way above some of the others that are out there. Even though we're in a higher interest rate market, this federal plus loan is at a higher interest rate. It does show that we have some forgiveness programs. They have dwindled down with this. There are some changes. I wouldn't highly recommend depending on those. I do think this is going to be a little bit of a changing landscape, but just be careful with these. Don't believe that there's a lot of forgiveness programs that are going to be left when you get to that point. So just be very cautious with that. But this is one of the easier loans to qualify for, though that is changing. I believe it's still possibly going to be one of the easier ones, but there still will be some caveats to that as well. So it was technically the easiest one to qualify for. So the question that we had was, can both parents apply for the plus loan? If so, how, since I started the application, does my spouse need to create their own account, assuming we go with the Parent Plus loan? I actually haven't ever had have parents do this, but I do know that both parents can apply, but the amount that has to be applied, that can be applied, it can't be any more than the amount that's left in the gap to be covered. So they do need their own account. So each parent will need their own FAFSA account. So that's studentaid.gov, create your own FSA ID. You will need your own account for each one of these to apply. So
Before we move on, Jennifer, I want to just make a comment about some of the stuff that's coming down the pipeline as the new legislation has put out there. So as Jennifer was saying, you really need to have a plan as you move forward, because the legislation has made a change that the cap will be $20,000 a year for a Parent Plus loan, and the lifetime limit is $65,000. So think about that. If you're talking about 20 per year, that's not going to cover you for all 4 years. So you've got to think about what that limit is, and is this going to be what the avenue that you're wanting to take? Because what that means is that you're going to have to step out into some of these other types of loans that we're going to talk about.
thank you. So more about the plus loan, a couple of things something I didn't cover. Typically when you're filling this out, you're going to get that instant approval or denial. So you're going to know right away when you do this. So if you're going to need to look at other options or not. And as Melissa just talked about the caps, I just highly, highly, highly recommend just thinking about some of the changes that are happening. If this is going to be a real fit for you, if you can qualify for other loans, they may be a better fit, because you're probably going to end up paying much less than what the federal plus loan is going to be. So we can move on to the next one, Melissa.
Okay, so the next loan is a state loan. And I think a lot of times this doesn't get thought of. Not every state actually has a state loan program, but there are state loan programs that allow you to use their state state loan program, even if you're not a resident of their state. So one of the things that you really have to think about is look at if your state has a loan program or one of these other state programs that do allow non-state residents to utilize, because these may be better options for you in the state where I live in. I am in the state of Texas. Our state loan was actually less an interest rate than the federal student loan this last year. So those can be additional options if you need additional dollars, because most of the time there are some different options. You can be parent only thing, or it can be a co-signing situation. And there are some situations if you have a co-signing situation that after a certain number of payments, the parent can be released off of the loan note. So there's all different kinds of combinations of loan programs out there. So look to see if your state has a state opportunity. But the 3 states that do have a great programs for you to look into, even if your state does not, is number 1 is Massachusetts. It's called MIFA. And then there's Rhode Island and Iowa. They all have very good interest rates, and they have MIFA has some of the best programs, I think, because they have a variety of options, because they have different loan repayment periods, they have a co-signing, they have a deferred. So every program is different, so you want to look into those. Also, they are very quick in the approval process, just like many of your other federal things that happens pretty quickly. So it's not something that it takes a lot of time. So some of the cons to this is that they could be less flexible than the federal programs. That's part of the thing about the federal programs is there is a little more, you can put it in deferral, or you have these different opportunities for repayment. So that's why the interest rate is a little bit higher, because it's kind of that insurance there. Whereas state loans and private loans are a little more fixed in the way that they do things and are harder to change up. So, but majority of these do not have origination fees, and their interest rates are definitely lower than the Parent Plus loan. So then we move into private student loan opportunities. I am sure that you have heard of these, and I'm sure if your student isn't already being bombarded, especially by Sally Mae, that they will be getting emails and probably some snail mail as well on some of these things. But there's Sally Mae, there's SoFi, there's College Ave, Send. There's a lot of different options out there. So you have to look and see what works for you. Again, there are many different options. There's a range of interest rates available. The one thing that you do want to be very careful about is many of your private loans have variable rate options, which can be really good in the beginning, but then they skyrocket in those interest rates. And so you want to be very careful about that, because that can get away from you and end up being very costly and could end up being more than the Parent Plus loan. So you want to be careful whenever you are looking at interest rates, and look for those that have fixed interest rates. Those are going to be your better option. And also, typically, you are not going to have origination fees with your private loan options. So I'm going to jump into our page that we have that has some of this information for you about the private loans over here. So this is what we call our paying the bill and borrowing toolkit. And this is our information here. And Jennifer, you wanted to share a little bit about this?
Yeah, this page right here, it's kind of it's giving you kind of a summary of the steps that you need to kind of walk through as we talked about maximizing the federal student loan. That's the first piece. And then if you're going to need to take a loan, if you're looking at other loans, some of the things that we have is a partnership with Ascent and College Avenue. We've listed that out there in step 2. Ascent is one of our new partners that we have for student loans. What's great about them is with the partnership, they basically have very, very dedicated services and to the CAP members that we have here. But theirs is a soft credit check. So you can do a soft credit check through theirs and figure out what it's going to take or if you can qualify for the loans and kind of what kind of rates we're looking at. So I'd highly recommend looking at that. And then those loans that Melissa just mentioned, also the state and private lenders out there, the state loans, Melissa, you can see on step 3. I don't know if you can point that out there, but Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Iowa, there's ones that will lend to anyone in any state. And then if you go down to the private lender table, if you click on that, it takes you all the way down to the bottom. And you're going to see where you can compare some of those loans out there that are partners with us in this process. But again, Ascent has been a great one that we've just connected with that has done job. And on that page, you'll also see we have a direct line to them. There's an email and connection, dedicated phone line for CAP members here that you can reach out to them to get better service and get a more dedicated person on that. And then lastly, on that step 4, you can compare those rates that you see down there, and then also those state loans as well with the federal plus loan, and find out what's best for you. Because again, we said not one, it's not a one size fits all. Again, it's very important to compare these and notate that your best, that best bet is for you may not be the one that your neighbor used. So make sure that you're checking out all these options because many of these have much better options for you over that federal Parent Plus loan. So I highly recommend looking at what are the options and what are those benefits to the different ones out there.
So as you are looking through this page, you'll see that there are links for all of these different places on here. And one of the things that I also want to share with you is down at the bottom, if you are trying to work through what is my plan, which loans I use, when am I going to use my 529, when should I do a loan, those kind of things, and you need support in helping you through that process, down at the bottom of that page is also a place where you can book a meeting with Jennifer or myself. And you also have the ability to use this coupon code to get a discount on our hourly meetings there. So I'm going to jump back into the PowerPoint real quick. And Jennifer is going to share a little bit about some of those unconventional opportunities.
So I don't want to run us over too far, but we want to make sure we hit all the options that you have. Some of you already know this, but if those of you who have a mortgage or have a home and have a mortgage on your home and have that equity in your home, this is a great opportunity if you need to use this. It is a good thing. It is a bad thing. It is our market right now. But if you own your home and have a lot of equity, this is definitely an option for some of you. And the day that the interest rates were very low, this was really a go-to for so many, almost all people. But that's not the case now. So we have a higher interest rate, so it's not so popular. However, if you decide to utilize your home equity, there's 3 different ways to do it. As you can see on the screen, we have the home equity line of credit. This is basically where you're going to your bank, doing an application. They're going to give you, quote, a line of credit. So you're not borrowing that day. You just have an option to access that line of credit. This is something that, typically is going to be a variable rate, but you're not paying interest until you borrow the money. But we always have a little bit of caution in the statement of utilizing this. 1, it is your home. 2, it can be variable. So if the rates go up, that could not be a great thing for you, or you may not be able to manage the payment, and we are risking our home. 2, if it goes down, great. That's a better day for us. But just be cautious when you're using a home equity line of credit. Know that in markets when things get really ugly, some banks do pull that line of credit. So we just have to have a backup plan if we're going to lean on that. The other is a home equity loan. So this is just a direct loan. It is against your home. So it's like a second mortgage. Typically, you can get a fixed rate on these, and sometimes better, but it's just dependent. But I would compare this against the private and state loans out there. So if you can get something comparable, I don't know that I'd risk my home or put this on my home. So make sure that you're also comparing that against those others that are out there. And then a cash out refinance. Again, this is what we used a lot when the rates were extremely low, and people could actually refinance just about everything they had and really end up in the winners, in the winner circle, because their lives would get so much easier. They can not only pay for college, but they can actually put more towards retirement. So that was a day when we could do that. But today, if we're talking about a cash out refi, there's multiple things and dynamics that we need to consider. Sometimes we may already have a significant debt load or some medical issues going on or some other things that we do need to reconfigure some of our things. And a cash out refinance with college and with everything else going on in our lives, this may actually be a fit. So it's not something I would take lightly. It definitely would connect with an advisor. We have people on our teams, ourselves do this, but I definitely wouldn't take this lightly before you really thought out the whole entire plan to make that step forward. So let's get into the next one. The next place that we have is going to be your retirement account. So you can take a 401k loan. I say from any of your retirement accounts, I always caution this is something that I really believe this is like the last place you should take, because you're stealing from your own future. We can borrow for college for our kids, but we cannot borrow for retirement. It's just not something that's happening. So we have to protect ourselves in that way as well. And I know we want to provide for our kids, but this is something that we could actually put ourselves in a little bit of danger later when it comes to the financial piece of this. So if you took a 401k loan, some of the cons that I want to talk about is that if you lose your job, this loan often can become due immediately. So if you can't repay the full thing, it is treated as a withdrawal. So you get taxed for the entire amount. That is a very large amount if something like that happens. I do know a few people who did this, and huge repercussions. So this triggers taxes and penalties, because one is, if you're not 59 and a half, you have a 10.5% penalty on it. And then you have the taxation of those dollars all at once. So you accumulate this over years, but now you're getting taxed all at once. This is not a good thing. So don't do this unless this is something you just absolutely have to do. But we do encourage you not to do this. And it is the most significant thing that I call damage, is that it's your loss of your future growth. So removing the money that's tax advantaged now that you're sheltering, you're robbing it of decades in those years that it could be building that compound growth. So a $20,000 withdrawal today could be $100,000 later. I just don't encourage touching this one at all. So the last one, Melissa, if you'll go to the next slide, that is going to be life insurance. We are not talking about term life insurance. We are talking about cash value life insurance. There are many of these policies that are actually crafted for college or college-like expenses, large expenses. They are crafted so that you can borrow from them, and basically you're paying back your own policy. This is not an easy conversation, meaning it's not just a simple process. You certainly want to make sure that you know exactly what you're doing, and that means connecting with your advisor, making sure this policy can sustain what you're going to do with it. And some people say withdraw. You really probably should take a loan against it, because it can also trigger tax implications. You can also lose need-based aid off of this, or alter your need-based aid. So this is something that we also encourage you to connect with your advisor, or one of us. We can actually help you in this process to determine if this is something that would be a viable option, or you should do it or not, because we can actually exhaust our policies and cause them not to be in effect for the purpose of what we wanted them for, and that's life insurance. So be very careful with using life insurance, but they are a great tool if yours was designed to do that for you. The next is going to be, Melissa, I'm so sorry, we're trying to rush through this so we can get any of your questions done, but these are some of the questions that you need to be asking yourself before we finalize this plan. Again, we need to make sure that we're creating this plan not only for the 1 year, but for the 4 years, and if not, another 10 years beyond that 4 years, because we may be paying a loan. So we have to make sure we can sustain this out there. So, how much does how much does that loan rate matter? Who should be on the loan and how long? Well, this is going to be based on the evaluation of what safety net we need. The rate might not be all the driver for everything. Do we need that safety net for the long haul? Do we need to make sure our lifestyle and budget can sustain this? If you're self-employed, you work off commission, you may need this flexibility in some of these other terms that are out there. So make sure you are looking at that. If something happens, what will happen? Can I make the payment? What will this do to my finances? But giving ourselves a little bit longer than choosing to pay early or at a shorter time is, I do have many families who choose this because they need that cushion to make sure. And most of my families actually get this done before that long-term plan that they picked, just because they wanted to make sure that if something happened, they had that safety net. But when it comes to protection and flexibility, those are the same things, because we sometimes want to pay a slight premium to ensure a safeguard in our financial future. This is no different than insurance. We all get car insurance because we don't plan on having an accident, but sometimes life happens and we have an accident. So choose a plan that gives you some insurance, even if you pay slightly more, or you think you may pay slightly more. And then if you have accessibility to that home equity, are you willing to put that on your home? Is this something that's a smart move, or is there some other options out there that may fit that and do the same thing for you, but not risk your home at the same time? So these are some of the questions that you need to start with. I'm so sorry we're hitting slightly over here, but we want to make sure that you guys really get a good plan and think about this process as a whole thing. And again, start with that junk drawer. Start with the junk drawer. Melissa?
So we've talked over and over tonight about doing the best thing possible. And so here is what you can see in a chart, in a graph format. And you can see right here that this is comparing a Parent Plus loan to a private loan. We talked about the loan distribution now being a maximum of $65,000 on the Parent Plus loan. And so if you were taking out a private loan versus that Parent Plus loan, you have an interest savings of $18,809 over the lifetime of the loan. And so therefore you are also saving in those loan fees. So that's something that's really important, because Jennifer mentioned there's a little over 4% fee on that Parent Plus loan. So really important piece to understand is that you have to decide what's going to work for you, but you can see the savings by choosing other options or other alternatives. By looking at the state loans or private loans, you may be in a position where you are saving a lot of money. So don't just think that the Parent Plus loan is your only option, and because it's showing up on your student's portal, that is the way that you have to go, because it is not. So definitely look into that. And so, as Jennifer said, make sure that you ask yourself those questions. What is your plan? How should I do this? You can go to the website right here that I dropped into the chat. That will take you to this page where you can see all of the toolkit and the steps and the different options that we. And if you scroll down to the bottom, you can click on there to schedule an appointment. If you are in your portal, you can also take this coupon code if you're in your portal and you are in our MyCap. Go up here and say talk to an expert. You can click on that as well. You click on that and you go through the process. You put the promotion code in here, and then once you pay, then you can find either Jennifer Hartman or Melissa Mieyr on the list, and you can go through that. So either here or here, either way, you can do that and put that coupon code in there and go through the process to book an appointment if you have any questions and concerns about your particular situation. So you will be receiving the follow-up email with the recording. So if you need to go back to this, I know we covered a whole lot tonight. Sorry we ran over just a little bit, but this is a really important piece of the process. So stay tuned for future emails.
Well, we're gonna go ahead and answer those. If you need to jump up, we understand. We're so sorry for going over, but we want to make sure some of these questions are answered. We had one more that came in. Actually, I think I have two. It says, I checked my students portal and the university website. The first tuition bill won't be sent until August. In the meantime, does my student need to do the requirements, the loan entrance counseling and signing the master promissory note for the federal student loan on studentaid.gov? Yes, they do. If you are accepting the federal student loan, if your student is going to, they're going to sign in under their FSA ID, and then they're going to go in that portal. So at the top, you'll see that menu drop down for the loans and grants. And on the left-hand side of that drop down menu, you're going to see the master promissory note, which is labeled MPN as well. And then you're going to see the student loan counseling. So there should be one on top of the other for that. And then I had another question. I'm not exactly sure what the question is asking, but it says, is any benefit for choosing between paying fees from 509 administrator or from personal account of $529 received? So I don't know exactly what you mean. If you want to clarify that in the chat, that would be great. Or you can email us as well. It's Melissa H at collegeaidpro.com or Jennifer H at collegeaidpro.com if you had that one specific question from tonight. But other than that, you can reach out to our out to College Aid Pro support. Is it support Melissa or contact us? I can't remember what they had. They have it out there, but you'll get it in your email. So just make sure if you do have those questions, reach out to the support and we'll be able to do that. But also look through that page that we've provided you. There's a lot of great information, and Peg has also done a video. So for that person who asked about the master promissory note and the federal direct student loan, Peg has done a video on this to help walk you through that process if you're not certain or your student's not certain how to do it. Okay.
Jennifer, since you mentioned that, I'll jump back on to our page here.
Great.
When you come on down here on that toolbox page, just past the appointment, if you keep on scrolling down, there's the loan entrance counseling and the master promissory note videos right there.
Yep, Peg has done a great job at putting those together for everyone. So just make sure that you get those done. And then we have another one. Does a federal loan change every year? What income do they look for, the parents or the students? So the federal student loan and the parent loan, once you have the loan, it's a fixed interest rate. Excuse me. So your rate is fixed that year. Every year, though, they adopt a new rate. So whenever that year comes about and you take that new loan will have a new rate. So that's important. And they don't look for income when it comes to the student loan. There's no qualifications for that. There's some changes happening to the parent loan. I don't have the specifics on those changes, but that is something that possibly will be coming down the pipeline for that. So unless there's anything else.
So it's great being here tonight, and look forward for that email with the recording. And if you want to book an appointment, you can go to the link and put it in the coupon code LOAN20 to get a discount on your hourly appointment. So everyone have a great night. Bye.